Good morning to you. In business news this hour, it has emerged that South Africans are spending slightly less of their take-home pay to service debt. According to the third quarter debt index by Debt Busters, the sustained high interest rate has increased the burden of servicing assets-linked debt. The index also shows that debt-to-income ratios are still high and unsustainable for the top income band. Debt Busters Bene Sege joins us now for more on these findings. Good morning to you, Bene. Not a good picture of the South African consumer. Let's talk about the spending that has now taken a dip due to servicing debt.
Yeah, I think the picture has been consistent for the last while, and I think we probably see it a bit differently. We see that South Africans are actually becoming proactive about addressing the debt management as hopefully an important first step towards good credit. And I think we have to understand that there's been a lot of pressures, as you know, and as your previous stories also highlighted earlier this morning. There's been a lot of pressures on the consumer, particularly driven by three things. One is that interest rates have kept increasing, and we see that the evidence of this is the unsecured debt in terms of, the average interest rates people are charged is about 25.5%. The second driver is the inflation. As we know, that has tapered somewhat, but still important. And the third one, which is quite significant, is that incomes have not risen to keep up with the inflation and the interest rate increases. And on top of this, we've also had severe lockdowns in 2020 and 2021, which has really impacted particular segments of the economy, particularly tourism, retail, hospitality, and so on. And I think you get to the picture that many more of our consumers, who are particularly those who borrowed for the first time to finance a vehicle or finance a home, and we're seeing a lot of them. They're actually seeking help with the professionals. And I think, in my view, it's a path to becoming healthier financially.
And that's the positive, but let's also debunk the notion of a high debt burden. The impact on a South African consumer, as well as the stress and the risk that it poses an individual in that situation. Talk us through exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to highlight debt is the other side of credit, and it becomes debt when the credit becomes burdensome, and it's the consumers are unable to deal with it. I think we normally see this becoming a bit of a burden when consumers are spending more than 30% of their take-home pay on repaying their debt. When you go above that threshold, you start feeling strain. And in the case of the Q3 debt index from Debt Busters, we see that the consumers who applied for debt counseling on average had to commit about 2/3 of their net income or take-home pay, about 63%. And that means 6 out of every 10 rand that you're taking home, you have to use to service your debt. And as you rightfully said, that puts unbelievable pressure mentally and financially on one. And it's not sustainable. And we see this variation with different income groups, as one would expect. Lower income groups have a lot of unsecured debt, particularly personal loans, and they're spending about the same amount of their take-home pay, but the composition of the debt is different. Whereas as you go up the income chain, we see that particularly those taking home 35,000 rand or more, the debt levels have increased significantly compared to a few years ago, and that's probably not great for the long term. As we said, it's great that the consumers are dealing with this debt, but I think my advice would be to start dealing with it at a much younger age. We've seen that those coming to us, particularly under the age of 30, have a much more manageable size of debt compared to their income. And I think if we address this early on, before we hit a particular age, it becomes a lot simpler in terms of how our relationship with money also evolves.
And what's on the concerning side of this conversation is the levels of unsecured debt. How is that impacted?
Yeah, that is probably one of the biggest impacts. And as we said before, inflation and interest rate increases are really combining with the lack of income increase, have really pushed consumers to find other avenues to expand their income. And the number one way they go with is personal loans. As we point out in our report, about 96% of the applicants who came to us had a personal loan of various sizes. And what this means is that the average unsecured debt compared to a few years ago is about 21% higher, where the incomes have been more or less flat, meaning we're basically supplementing the shortfalls in our incomes with expensive unsecured debt. And as we pointed out before, the average interest rate for what we see in that unsecured debt is about 25.5%. If we jog our memories a few years back to 2020, that was 20.9% per annum. And that's a significant increase in terms of the interest rates, meaning we're spending more of our income, essentially paying back interest. And I think that's the one we have to deal with. Let's deal with the unsecured debt immediately. And I think our lives become easier once we do that.
Lastly, Bene, is this trend expected to continue? I'm already seeing reports that it's unlikely to be a Black Friday with too much spending as well as the festive season.
Yeah, I think consumers are under a lot of strain, and we keep giving the message to be careful when you're spending money on. It's been a hard year. We do expect the trend to continue because higher interest rates are putting a lot of first-time borrowers, particularly the younger generation between the age of 30 to 35, under severe pressure, particularly those who have financed their vehicles and their homes for the first time. Now they have to pay several thousand rand more than they did when they first financed those assets. And I think particularly for them, we really feel for them. And I think we have to be careful because just after the festive season, we also have a new year, which generally come with increases in terms of rents, increases in terms of insurance payments, school fees, and all of that. So we have to consider all of those things, I think, as we go into the festive season. And I'm afraid to say, I think we're expecting a similar trend going into next year.
Thank you so much for your input. Bene Sege is with Debt Busters this morning, talking us through the organization's debt index, painting a dim picture of the outlook with regards to South Africa's spending. On the business desk, we move on now to the JSE. That's where trade